I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Jenice Contreras. Jenice is known as a champion for economic empowerment, serving as the president and CEO of the Northeast Ohio Hispanic Center for Economic Development. Her strategic vision and unwavering dedication have been pivotal in overseeing the chamber and the Small Business Development Center, fostering community development and entrepreneurial success. At the forefront of Jenice's transformative achievements is the CentroVilla project, a $12 million adaptive reuse initiative that she leads as the project owner and co-developer. CentroVilla opened its doors in May of 2025 as a revitalized warehouse, complete with micro retail spaces, a commercial kitchen, a business innovation center, office space, and a community gathering area for arts and culture. Jenice's efforts are not only reshaping the Clark-Fulton neighborhood, Ohio's most densely populated Hispanic enclave, but also nurturing cultural preservation, wealth creation, and business development. We are thrilled to have her join us today to tell us more. So without further ado, let me introduce Jenice.
Thanks, Angela, and thank you for this opportunity to join you for this lunch session. Super excited for our chat. Nice to see a few friends on the call. So hello, and also always happy to meet new friends. So yes, let's get right into it, and looking forward to questions and a conversation throughout the session. So as Angela stated, I have the distinct honor to serve as the president and CEO of the Hispanic Center for Economic Development. Our core, day-to-day mission is to support entrepreneurs at whatever stage of their business readiness, right? So if someone has an idea and they're trying to figure out, is this marketable? Is there a market for this? Or a venture that they would like to take on, we're able to help them do that exploration and use research and use a ton of resources to really make sure it's a viable business before going into it, and that you're able to go into business objectively, as well as supporting established entrepreneurs. So you could be pre-venture, you could be a startup, you could be an established business and need to figure out some sort of business challenge. Entrepreneurship is a very lonely place. And so our center is there to be able to be that support system and help you empower you with information so that you could make sound decisions about your business as you go through this journey. So we are an extension of that. I say always jokingly, typically when we have a business idea, you go to a family member or you go to friends. And so they're either going to crush your dreams or they're going to lead you on and say, yes, honey, you could do it. And it's probably a horrible idea, right? So we're able to be like that objective voice on entrepreneurship. We have a small business development center in our office. We are also the home to the Minority Business Assistance Center. All of our business advisors are certified business advisors, which is also very important. They're folks that are prepared to really coach and guide you. We see over 2,000 entrepreneurs a year. So we have a very high volume of entrepreneurs that we support with a very small team. And our services are free and they're open to everyone. So I think, you don't have to speak Spanish, you don't have to be Latino. We don't have any age restrictions. Really, anyone could receive services at the center. So CentroVilla25, I know a few of you have had the opportunity to come to CentroVilla, and if you haven't, I look forward to seeing you at CentroVilla25. But really, the journey of CentroVilla25 has been a decade long. So it's kind of nice to be here, but it was definitely a long journey to get us into this amazing, colorful, rehabbed facility. A decade ago, we knew development was going to continue to happen on the West 25th corridor, on the near West Side, and just our city as a whole. Yet the Clark-Fulton neighborhood had not received an equal share of investment. Actually, it was kind of a little bit forgotten of a neighborhood. As you went, and still, if you go through our commercial corridors of Clark Avenue, West 25th, Fulton, Denison, you would still see the lack of investment in this neighborhood, and obviously working very hard with leaders in our community to change that. The majority of our commercial corridors are filled with dollar stores, auto parts, fast food, and really nothing else. being a place that supports entrepreneurship, we would have entrepreneurs come in and want to have a space, a physical space for their business, but really nowhere to send them to, right? We didn't have any white box spaces or anywhere that would be cost efficient for an entrepreneur starting. And so that was really the initial like problem we were trying to solve. How do we address investment in our retail corridors? And how do we provide opportunity, affordable space for entrepreneurs? So that was really like the basis of how we got into this. And so I had the opportunity to travel to a conference early on in my tenure with the organization. And ended up in Minneapolis and took one of those cheesy tours you take on conferences and ended up in a place called Mercado Central. And Mercado Central in Minneapolis had a very similar story. They had immigrant entrepreneurs looking for opportunity. They had a Mexican councilwoman. The city was supporting the community. And so walking into Mercado Central and seeing all of these micro retailers, you walked in through like a Mexican bakery, you know, like a piñata exploded. And then you got past the bakery and there were all these kiosks and smaller businesses. The second floor of the market had professional services, attorneys, money wiring, accountants, just a slew of other services. But the most important thing about the story, as I listened to Mercado Central, was how this one building then helped renovate the entire neighborhood. And so now, if you go down the street of Mercado Central, you see multiple businesses. You see a vibrant retail district for the community. And so that was my aha moment on saying, oh, ethnic market, I could do this. I have buildings and I have business owners. And so came home and said, you know, let's do that. How hard can it be to open a market? So 10 years later, I will tell you it was very, very hard, but not impossible, right? I definitely leaned on folks that knew real estate development. You know, we were a small micro nonprofit with very limited resources. And so we really needed to lean on folks that knew how economic development projects worked and more importantly, how did you get them financed? I was fortunate to have a board of directors that supported the vision to be able to take on such a like monstrous of a project. And we went to work. We went to all of our partners. At the time, near West neighborhood CDC helped us with creating some of the initial performas and connecting us to some of the initial consultants like new market tax credits and again many of the tools that are used in economic development for real estate projects. We started looking for a building, right? Like where would be the home for CentroVilla25? Would we do a new construction? Would we rehab? And so at the time, there was a number, and still kind of on West 25th, maybe, I think at the time there was a 20% vacancy rate for warehouse, old manufacturing facilities. And so literally next door to where our office was on West 25th and Clark was the H.J. Weber building. The building was owned by the Weber family. They ran a flooring company out of this location and they had since sold the company, but still had about, 6 employees that worked there. And so we kind of like chased them a little bit for the building, eventually convincing them to sell us the facility. So it's a little less than 2 acres of land. They also ran some residential properties alongside with the 32,500 square foot warehouse. In 2019, we became the proud owners of the building that now is CentroVilla25. And then COVID happened, right? And so our whole world was shaken around that in the middle of raising money and in the middle of this development. It did provide us an opportunity to go back and look at our financial model, look at the scale of the project. How can we still get this done? You know, it was a time that foundations were also shifting their focus of philanthropy to immediate needs, right? And so real estate wasn't necessarily a priority, coupled with the expenses. Everything became more expensive, and particularly in construction. And so we had a lot of challenges, to say the least, around getting this project going. But we didn't give up and kept at it and continued steadfast into getting this project done. I will tell you, and would be remiss if I didn't say that I grew up in this neighborhood. I literally grew up behind CentroVilla on West 30th. So I often share with folks like, hey, I spent a lot of time on a second floor, porch apartment where I lived, thinking about all the things I would do as a young adult, as a teenager. And all along I was looking at CentroVilla because it was literally in front of my face. So it's just full circle for me personally, to have grown in this neighborhood, to have gotten a ton of opportunities throughout my career, and to be home and dedicate my time to CentroVilla. I am a Lincoln West graduate. Lincoln West is also on West 30th. And so it's personal. And so people often, ask, you didn't give up or you kept going. And it's like, well, it wasn't really a choice, right? I had some fundamental beliefs on knowing that our community deserved space, and deserved space that was equitable and culturally appropriate for our community, and that our entrepreneurs deserved a chance, right? And so just very fundamental in that approach. And we went to work. We did the work. We got a lot of champions throughout the city that really supported this initiative, the Cleveland Foundation, the city, the county, um, Councilwoman Santana, right? And the entire city council. And so that took a long time, right, to convince folks. Early on, everybody loved the idea, but it was, can you really execute on it? And I also didn't have something that was done before, right? So it wasn't like, I'm like, oh, here's models of best practices. But yet there is a story about ethnic markets. And so I also spent some time learning about ethnic markets being drivers of community, and creating their own hyperlocal economies. And so there was something to really latch on showing, what a best practice looked like in the space. And so it's like, well, if we don't have the space somewhere else, we'll just create the space and we'll create the businesses and we'll create the market. And that's exactly what we did. The entrepreneurs that participated in this program worked with us long before CentroVilla opened. We did run some business incubators in the neighborhood. We ran an incubator on the corner of Seymour and West 25th called Las Tienditas del Mercado, where we incubated about 9 businesses that eventually would go to CentroVilla. They are in the city and they've opened in other locations, and ultimately leading into CentroVilla. In January of this year, we started our soft opening. And so we were able to open the market. Why not open a market in January? I think it's totally insane that we did that. But the good news of opening a market in January is that our sales continue to grow. And so it was a good time for them to kind of test out their systems and train their staff and build capacity. In May of 2025, we just celebrated our grand opening and are fully open for business. Within CentroVilla, you will find, obviously, the market is the sexy part of the project. Our market, because we are in an old warehouse, is divided by a wall. Mercado Verde is the green side of the market. The ceilings are painted green, and so that's why we call it the green market or Mercado Verde. It's our food hall portion of the market. So there's 8 micro retailer kiosks. 7 out of the 8 are currently in operations. So you have a coffee shop, a bakery shop, and then you have 5 food stalls. Within those food stalls, you are going to experience food from Venezuela, Mexico, El Salvador, Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. And so we have an enormous variety of things that you could try at CentroVilla. I wish I could take credit for that, but I can't. One of my worries was that we would have too many Puerto Rican kiosks because we have a lot of Puerto Ricans in Northeast Ohio. Yet it's really a reflection of the diversity and how Latinos are changing within our region. We continue to be the fastest growing population in the state of Ohio, in the city, in the county, however you want to slice it. And so I think that's important to note. Why CentroVilla? Why now? Why in Cleveland, right? and why this makes sense for us. As you visit other cities, they have these vibrant cultural districts. And so even though the Latino community has a long, rich history here in Northeast Ohio, we didn't have that place, right? We didn't have that spot that kind of unified our community. And so now we do with CentroVilla 25. So CentroVilla is the center of the Hispanic village on West 25th. So if you were wondering the name, and beyond the kiosks, we have the Pink Market, Mercado Rosa, which is products and services. So there we have gift shops, collectible items. We're getting ready to open a cigar shop. You have a jewelry shop. You have a promotional items and customized items shop. We even have a realtor that has an office there. We have an outdoor plaza, so we have garage doors that lead into the outdoor space where we expect to have summer concerts and activities in that space. We do have a bar, which I'm really excited about, to have mojitos in the Clark-Fulton neighborhood, which you cannot do now. So we are in the process of getting our liquor license. We currently do beer and wine on the weekends. And then the second floor of CentroVilla is the Business Innovation Center. So our offices are located in the second floor. Most people don't realize we're in the building, but we are in the building. CHN Housing Partners also has a neighborhood office at CentroVilla 25. We have a commercial kitchen for food producers. You rent the kitchen by the hour, and everything that's done in the commercial kitchen goes outside of CentroVilla. So the commercial kitchen is totally separate. The one thing about our commercial kitchen is that you could see it from the market. So usually kitchens are tucked away in a corner, nobody sees them. Grandma's back there cooking. Not at CentroVilla. It's messy, it's chaotic, and you could see the kitchen from the market. And we did that intentionally, right? We wanted to bring that to the forefront of our work. So that is kind of my story. I feel like I'm leaning on time, but I do want to allow opportunities for questions and answers. The one thing that I will say, CentroVilla has also become quite a destination. So we're having a lot of our partners hosting meetings, events. Next week, the HFLA, Hebrew Free Loan Association, is hosting their annual fundraiser at CentroVilla. And so we are open for business and available. We have our website, cv25.org. You could see the stories of each of the vendors. There's videos on the vendors. There's a directory, as well as if you want to host an event, you could fill out a form. So we've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. But if that's okay, Angela, I will stop now and open the space for questions.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Jenice. So I just love the image of 8-year-old you on the porch looking at this building, and like if there was only a time-lapse video and she could see what you see today. So like talk to me about just the transformation of the Clark-Fulton neighborhood and what you've witnessed and what it is today.
Yeah. So, obviously growing up in this neighborhood, I remember early days of things being redeveloped and big box coming into town. I actually used to go to church in a little chapel on West 25th. I see Cynthia on the line, so she'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Cristo Rey, eventually being sold to a developer, right? And so we got pharmacies and we got, again, fast food. And so at the time we thought that was a good thing, right? We're like, oh, we're getting a Walgreens. This is awesome, right? Now in retrospect, we see how a lot of these big box have broken up the landscape of what our Clark Avenue looked like, right? And so having those experiences as a child, not having the words and the language to understand economic development or understand the long-term implications to small business and communities, right? Houses being demolished. And so to now, again, bring it full circle and be able to look at our neighborhood and describe to you a vibrant, amazing community. But when you drive down Clark and West 25th, the story doesn't match what you see physically. And so we miss that sometimes. How is community supposed to happen if community doesn't have space? There are things that we take for granted. And so CentroVilla is kind of the beginning of that space. Every day that I walk through the market is a reunion of some sort. I'm either seeing somebody I grew up with or a colleague of mine or someone, and folks just, it just has become such an organic place. I hear people tell me it feels like it was here always. And it's like, doesn't it, just gives you that sense of this was right. This is exactly where it belongs. This is our moment in time. And we welcome all folks, right? Like all kinds of people. We encourage people to come in, put tables together, host informal meetings, really feel comfortable in finding a little piece of home within the walls of CentroVilla.
That's great. And I love that you described kind of what happens inside because from outside, of course, it's gorgeous and vibrant and colorful. And then you go inside and there's music playing and it's joyful. It's a celebration of culture. So what a nice thing to hear that it feels like it's been there all along.
Yeah, Angela, one of the things that I say a lot about Cleveland, I don't know where we decided to make sure that all our buildings match the color of our sky and everything's gray, right? And so Centro Villa is just this burst explosion of color that just people, and it's great to see people describe it. They're like, it just makes you happy, right? It just gives you the sense of happiness and break in the middle of all the gray, right? And saying that metaphorically and literally, right, around giving you just the sense of hope, the sense of happiness, the sense of, yes, I could grow here, I could share here, I could eat here, I could bring my family here and really enjoy that. And we need more spaces like that. We need to hold spaces for each other.
So how did you maybe keep your happy? So you said, people always ask you, how did you stay committed over 10 years? But you had to sort of keep that optimism when you didn't have a blueprint to go from and you knew that this was your vision, but how did you stay optimistic through it all?
Yeah. So, I mean, I will blame my mom's stubbornness for that, right? Inheriting, and I feel a lot of women specifically were very stubborn. Um, it's also like a realization of what happens when you have a little dream that's in your heart and in your mind, and you can't stop thinking about it, right? And it keeps coming back, and it's almost annoying, right? That it just doesn't let you be at peace in order to do that. And so I feel like somehow that was planted in this is the right thing to do. And this is the leadership charge that I had to take on. And so, yes, we had plenty of times that were discouraging. We didn't get the grants, we didn't get the funding, we didn't get the building. We had a lot of things that happened throughout the role. But I also felt like, hey, our community deserved this, and we needed to get it done. And so by hell or high water, we were going to get it done. And again, had a whole army of folks that equally believed that it could be done, but that also ran the financials and also knew that it made financial sense. We did an economic impact study. So we also did our homework, right? It wasn't just a dream and not backed by all of the work that is required to convince funders and lenders. This was a $14 million project. And so $14 million in real estate maybe is not a lot of money, but for an organization like ours and something that had just never been done before was astronomical. We also had people in the Latino community make pledges and make commitments to invest in Centro Villa. We have an initiative called Power 100 where we asked 100 leaders to contribute $5,000 to the project. We're at $360,000. This is money from people's pockets, right? And so our community really believed in this, and our community is not used to giving that way, right? Like we're not philanthropic in that sense. Some of us are, but culturally it's not typical. And so I think that's just a testament on how our community was really yearning for this space and really supported it and came together to make sure that it happened.
So that kind of speaks maybe to the uniqueness of Cleveland and the Cleveland population too. But what other things maybe did you borrow from Minneapolis and what things were you very committed? Like, no, this has to be very Cleveland centric.
Yeah, so a lot of things, most of the learnings sometimes come from like what mistakes that you make, right? I love asking people like, what mistakes did you make? Or if you had to do it over, how would you do it? There's a Caribbean market in Brooklyn, New York called Flatbush Market. I drew a lot from there. Obviously, Mercado Central. There's a few markets in Seattle and San Antonio. And so again, just everywhere. There's also Asian markets, right? That I also leaned in on Thai Town in Los Angeles. And now I feel like I have a whole network of ethnic market colleagues. So some of it was what mistakes did you make and how did you get around those? And others are just more like tips. But I didn't even have to go too far. Van Aken Market, while it's not an ethnic market, is a market in elements, right? And so we did lean on Van Aken Market as well. When I didn't have nothing, trying to like explain to people in Northeast Ohio what is CentroVilla, what was it going to be like, right? Because I gave tours of an empty, dusty building, and I was selling this dream, like, here we're going to have the commercial kitchen, and here we're going to have this, right? And people are like, all right, this is crazy. But we were like, all right, have you been to Van Aken Market? And they'd be like, yes. I'm like, all right, is Van Aken less bougie and all Latino? And that is CentroVilla 25.
That's awesome. How do you utilize volunteers at CentroVilla, and what types of experience or expertise are you seeking in volunteers?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we are starting to formalize a volunteer program for CentroVilla because we also want to make sure that the volunteers have a good experience coming in. We initially had to like rush and use volunteers to simply be greeters and welcome people to the building and help them navigate the building just because it's new and folks, didn't understand the other side of the market and so forth. And so I think that is one of the ways that we've early on have used greeters. It was also because we had a brief emergency around how do we protect our building in the event that we had a visit from ICE. And so while it's unfortunate that that is the reality of our building, it's a colorful building, there's a big H in our name, and so we're kind of on the target list, right? So, but we had a whole community of folks that helped us by volunteering their time to become greeters, to welcome people, to help people navigate and keep CentroVilla as a safe space. Obviously, content creation, marketing, communications are always needs. Every nonprofit will probably say that. We can't do enough of it. It's very difficult to capture our stories and share our stories with the community. It requires a lot of volume of people to come into CentroVilla and spend money to make CentroVilla function, right? For all of these business owners. And so there's a responsibility there on making sure that we create market experiences that welcome people in. So for example, today's Wednesday, tomorrow's Thursday, we have Wellness at CentroVilla initiatives. So we have a Zumba class that happens on Thursdays. Fridays we have happy hour yoga. We also have domino night. Third, Friday of the month is free salsa lessons, right? So just doing things that also encourage families and individuals to come and spend time at CentroVilla. And we're still learning. So I think we're also open for ideas and volunteers that are willing to use their expertise, whether it's event planning or fundraising to marketing, communications, to IT, logistics. I mean, there's so many elements to this facility.
As you look ahead, how do you envision the community itself shaping and sustaining the energy and purpose of CentroVilla over time?
So we are growing, as I mentioned, right? We are a growing community. The vision would be that instead of CentroVilla just being one building on this corridor, is that we would have an entire corridor and we would have a CentroVilla 25 district of colorful buildings where people live, work, and play in the near west side of Cleveland. And so CentroVilla is the beginning of really transplanting and reimagining this neighborhood and this community in a way that's authentic and true to the people that live there. We talk a lot about neighborhood redevelopment. And so, but somehow the trending has been that as soon as a neighborhood is redeveloped, is gentrified or there's displacement, right? And so there has to be something to that. What happens when you redevelop a neighborhood for the people that are there, right? That you incorporate into the fabric of your development elements that keep them in place. And so that is really what CentroVilla 25 is attempting to do. That is what my colleagues and partners in this work are intended to do, is to really create a different model to think about neighborhood development from the bottom up.
Well, Janice, thank you so much. This is so important to Cleveland, and we are thrilled that you stuck with it and you were resilient and committed. And just thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I'll see you at CentroVilla 25.